Hi everyone, my name is Amy from the Helms Academy, and today we're doing our Reading and Writing Club recap. This week we talked about creating an essay outline. So when we talk about an outline, that means putting our ideas kind of in shorthand first, so that way we remember and have something to refer to when we write the actual essay. Now, this might seem like an extra step to a lot of you, but I think the benefit here is that once we have those ideas down and we can do that quickly, we don't have to worry about forgetting some of the things we wanted to talk about or getting off track later. So I wanted to highlight some of the main benefits that I thought of when I create an outline, including that you can organize your ideas without writing those full sentences. So you don't have to commit to something just yet. You, in your outline, will be able to rearrange parts of it and move things around if it fits better somewhere else. Outlines help you make sure that everything is included, all the ideas that you wanted to include from the beginning. So oftentimes when we hear something, like you'll be given a prompt or a question to answer, you'll have lots of ideas at the beginning. But sometimes when you get into the stress of writing, you'll get distracted from that idea or forget what they are. So an outline just helps make sure that you have everything that you want to include. It keeps you focused and on the same topic, and it creates the bigger picture so that later you can add in extra details if you want, or so you can organize the details at the beginning. And it saves time on the back end. On the back end, you'll be able to do the writing from your outline, and then maybe you'll have more time at the end to be able to read through that and edit and proofread. All right, so the formal outline is one strategy that we could use. Now, what you do with a formal outline is you first start by listing the main points. So if you remember from previous writing and reading clubs, we have done outlining as far as talking about the different parts of an essay, and then we filled in the full content. This week, we're not going to fill in all of the content. It won't look like a complete essay yet, but we're going to talk about how you could create this outline and easily see how it turns into an essay. So here, like we talked about before, there are 5 parts, just like our 5-paragraph essay. So here you would have your introduction, your first point, your second point, your third point, and your conclusion. So think of it like this. Your introduction is your main argument about this. Your first, second, and third points, that Roman numeral 2, 3, and 4, those are all the things that support the reason, or they're the reasons to support why you believe this main idea that you put up in the intro. Oftentimes with these pieces of writing, it's going to ask you to make an argument based on 2 opposing arguments. So you'll take a side, right? So your intro is going to be your position, and then why do you believe that? First point, second point, third point. There you go. Now under those, you'll see the ABC, and that's where we can put in a little indent to make sure that we know everything that's indented over one level actually just means that it's part of that same paragraph. So where you see ABC, those go with the paragraph that's listed above it. So for example, you'll give a point, and then you'll give stories and facts and details that help support that point. And you'll do that for all 3 of your main points. It's kind of like how you make any other argument, right? You wouldn't just say, well, it's because I think so. You would give a reason, and then you'd give some evidence behind it. That's what you're doing in your writing. The last one down at the bottom is the conclusion, and I like to think of the introduction and the conclusion as 2 pieces of sandwich bread. They're going to be very similar to each other. So in your introduction, you're going to make your main argument and point. In your conclusion, you're going to restate that argument and point. Here's another way that we might do this work. We could use a graphic organizer. So a graphic organizer is essentially just a fancy way of saying that you use concepts, shapes, and arrows to be able to point in the right direction. One person on our call this week even mentioned they like to add in pictures. When they can't quite think of exactly the words they want to say, but they want to remember the idea, they might sketch out a quick picture. There are lots of different ways to create outlines, and none of them are right or wrong. We just want to make sure that they're in a format that's going to help you to craft a good essay in the end. Now, you'll notice that in both of these, they're very similar actually to the structure that we used on the last slide. You'll see on the first one there, the one that says persuasion map, it asks you for your position first. So that's basically the introduction, right? what is it that you believe about this argument? And then it asks you to give 3 reasons, just like our 3 body paragraphs or our 3 Roman numerals like we saw on the last slide. And then you can see each reason has multiple other boxes where you can put more details about that. Same thing on the other side, just a slightly different variation on how it's structured. Okay, so we're going to look at a sample writing assignment today. This writing assignment is going to give us 2 different opinions on daylight savings time. So I encourage you right now to think about, what do you know about daylight savings time? And do you have any feelings about it? So that helps us to get in the framework of what we'll be reading about. And it's shown, just like if you are putting a decoration on a cake, you need to make sure there's a little bit of icing there for it to stick to. When you prime your brain with what you know about a subject, it puts that icing down so that other information can stick to it. All right, so the benefits of daylight savings time. Right away from the title, we know that this person, whoever's writing this piece, is in favor of daylight savings time. All right, so this one says, many studies have investigated the benefits and costs of DST. Research in the 1970s found that DST saved about 1% per day in energy costs. On average, most electricity used is for lighting and appliances. It makes sense that more sun at the end of the day meant less need for electricity. This follows right along with Ben Franklin's argument over 200 years ago. Supporters of DST also claim that more sunlight saves lives. Studies have indicated that traveling home from work or school in daylight is safer. Nearly 3 decades of research shows an 8 to 11% reduction in crashes involving pedestrians and a 6 to 10% decrease in crashes for vehicle occupants after the spring shift to DST. Other studies reveal that, following a similar logic, DST reduces crime because people are out completing chores after their business or school day in sunlight, lessening their exposure to crimes that are more common after dark. So with that, it's a short reading, similar to what you would read on the GED or the HiSET or the TASC test, and you have one side of the argument. Now, we know the other article is going to be a different argument. So let's take a look. This one is called Against Daylight Saving Time. So this one says, a DSTA 2007 study in California indicated that DST had little or no effect on energy consumption that year. A 3-year study of counties in Indiana showed that residents of that state spent $8.6 million more each year for energy, and air pollution increased after the state switched to DST. The researchers theorized that the energy jump was caused in part by increasing the use of air conditioning as a result of maximizing daylight hours. Recent research has also brought into question the safety aspect of the yearly switch to and from DST. In one study, pedestrian fatalities from cars increased immediately after clocks were set back in the fall. Another study showed 227 pedestrians were killed in the week following the end of DST, compared with 65 pedestrians killed the week before DST ended. An adjustment period drivers endure each year is a dangerous time for pedestrians, and daylight saving time may be the reason. Instead of a gradual transition in the morning or afternoon by just minutes of sunlight each day, the immediate shift of 1 hour forward or backward fails to provide drivers and pedestrians time to adjust. When you also consider the cost of the abrupt transition in terms of confusion caused by people who forget to adjust their clocks, opponents say any benefits gained by DST are simply not worth the trouble. So again, we've seen 2 different sides of the argument, and what you will need to do is answer a question. And the question today is, should we continue to use DST or not? Use the text to support your answer. Now, I want to make it very clear that it does not matter which side of the argument you take. They don't think that one side is better than the other necessarily. They just want to make sure that you can provide details that will show that you can make an argument based on what you read and that you understood what you read. So it's okay if you pick yes, we should continue, or if we pick no. And we'll actually look at examples with both today. Okay, so we talked before about that formal outline, right, where we use the Roman numerals. So here's how I would sample outline an essay. I'm going to start with making my statement, and that's in paragraph 1, the introduction. And I'm going to say DST is important because it makes the world a better place. Okay, now I have my focus. I am going for, yes, we should keep DST. It is important for our world. So that means that I'm going to be focusing on a lot of the positive details. So the first thing I want to do is pick 3 things that I can talk about there. So I said, okay, I can talk about how it's safer for walkers and drivers. I can talk about how it saved energy costs. And I can talk about how there's less crime. And then again, in the conclusion, remember those 2 slices of bread, the introduction and conclusion? Conclusion, I just want to repeat to my reader that we should keep daylight saving time. And there we go. So in less than a minute, I have just written down some ideas of what I want to talk about. And what this does is it keeps me on track. So that way when I go to write my first paragraph, I know, okay, I'm going to stop with my first paragraph. What's my second one about? I'll have it right there on my outline. All right, so another thing to think about though, this is obviously the shortened version. Before we had seen where you add in the AB, or more. You can add as many details as you have time for or that make sense in that space. So in here, I just added 2 spaces for details under each number in the middle. So the details just go with those body paragraphs. So here I would say, okay, for my first body paragraph, which is Roman numeral 2, I can see how it is safer for people driving because they can see people a little bit easier in the daylight. I can see, if we talk about the saved energy, that 1% of energy that was saved. I can look at the less crime because people are spending more daylight hours than they would hours in the dark when more crime happens. So all of the details that I read about in the text, those are things that I want to take and include in my essay in making my argument because I want to make sure that I'm showing that I read that text and can include that. So again, I didn't fill it in on here formally, but you have some ideas now, some things that you could put down for those details. And there are multiple things for each of those 2, 3, and 4 that we could put in there. So here's another example using a sort of graphic organizer. This is a very simple outline that I can completed. And you can see, again, the idea of the 2 sandwich bread pieces with the 2 green circles, and then my 3 body paragraphs in the middle. So I started with my main argument, and this time I took the opposite approach. I said we should do away with DST because it is no longer beneficial. Well, I need to provide 3 reasons for why I believe that. So I said, okay, it's no longer beneficial because it actually increases energy consumption. It's a hard adjustment for commuters, and it's inconvenient. Okay, now if I were to go back to the article that I read, I could find the statistics about the slight increase in energy consumption. That could be one of my details. And I could put that on here, or I could, jot that down somewhere else where I would remember to use it later. I could have the hard adjustments for commuters, right? We could talk about the number of accidents that happen that they mentioned in there and the stats around that. We could look at the inconvenience and how it's difficult for people to adjust their sleep schedules. And this is a good chance for you to jump in with things that you know about this. If you have a story about it being an inconvenience to you, or you want to include something just from your own experience, you're allowed to include those things as well. I just want to make sure that you're also including things from the text, because the text is really what they're looking for when they're grading these kinds of essays on your test. And down at the bottom, you see the conclusion that DST is more frustrating than helpful, so we should no longer use it. And again, that's just a reflection of the introduction. Thank you so much for joining me today for this Writing and Reading Club recap. I hope that you'll check out the Helms Academy by subscribing to our YouTube channel below, looking for us on Facebook and on Instagram, and by checking out helmsacademy.org.